Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers that cover the NFL on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your host, Erin Summers.
Welcome into the New Orleans Saints podcast. I'm Erin Summers. Week 14 is underway, and the Saints kicked off practice today outside on the outdoor field and in somewhat of the elements. It's a little warmer here than it's going to be this weekend, where the Saints will play the Giants at MetLife Stadium. As far as attendance goes, running back Kendre Miller, center Eric McCoy, and guard Lucas Patrick were all back at practice. Looking at the Giants, they are 2-10, coming off a Thanksgiving Day loss to the Cowboys. As they're parting ways with quarterback Daniel Jones, the Giants went with Tommy DeVito, who the Saints saw last year in the Dome. In this most recent game, he was out due to a forearm injury, and Drew Lock played. Lock was sacked 6 times, threw a pick 6, and fumbled. Neither DeVito or Lock have thrown a touchdown pass this year. Head coach Brian Daboll said today that it would be Drew Lock that would start Sunday. Either way, the Giants come into this game with the worst scoring offense in the league at 15.3 points per game. Defensively, they have been led by defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence, who leads the NFL at his position with 9 sacks. However, Lawrence suffered a dislocated elbow versus the Cowboys and is now on IR, likely done for the season. Saints quarterback Derek Carr said he still thinks the defensive line is the strength of this Giants defense.
Yeah, their pass rush, they've been really good against the pass. Their linebackers run and hit, sideline, punch the ball out. Secondary, has some explosive athletes, able to make plays on the football. They're hungry, they're hungry just like we are. You can tell on the tape, but great pass rush, great D-line. And anytime you have that in this league, you have a chance. And so, Burns I've played against, Thibodeau, I've played against these guys, and I know what they're all about. They're really, really good players in our league, and, top tier. So we got our work cut out for us for sure. But excited about the challenge of going against them, in their place.
The Saints are looking to bounce back from Sunday's loss to the Rams and avoid a slide. Here's interim head coach Darren Rizzi.
Yeah, listen, I think one of the best things today, and Monday and today, was I don't feel anything different from what I felt the last few weeks. Our guys are in a really positive space. I think a big question for us this week is, how do we respond? How do we handle, there's an area, listen, I told our guys this morning in the team meeting, we've lost our last 4 road games. That's not a secret. We've lost our last 2 road games that we played outdoors. That's not a secret. These are facts. And how do we handle, we didn't handle it very well in prior to when we lost the game. We didn't respond very well. We kind of let it snowball and kind of got that domino effect. So I think it's a big week for us in regards to a lot of those things. We're on the road. We're going to play in the elements. We haven't responded well to losses. One of the things this week's going to be our second half performance. That's one of the things we got to get better at. We've been way too many peaks and valleys coming out at halftime. Our third quarter hasn't been great. So those are the things we're kind of focused on right now. And I haven't seen a dip in our locker room whatsoever. Our leadership's been great. Our attitude's been great. Thought we had a great practice outside today. So that's really just to focus on is on getting better at those things.
For more on our upcoming opponent, let's bring in the Athletic's Dan Duggan, who covers the Giants, to break down their season for us and what we can expect Sunday. Dan, thanks for joining me on the New Orleans Saints podcast. We are in for a showdown this weekend in New York between, unfortunately, teams that haven't performed as well as we would have hoped they did this season. What has been just the overall theme for the Giants?
Ooh, where to begin? There wasn't super high expectations coming into this season, but it's still been, an utter disappointment and failure, whatever you want to call it. I think the obvious easy place to start is quarterback. With Daniel Jones, they gave him the big contract 2 years ago. Last year, I think, maybe there was a feeling you could give him a mulligan. The team was really banged up. He obviously suffered some major injuries. So you said, okay, didn't go well, but now he's healthy. We've upgraded the O-line. We've added Malik Neighbors. Like, maybe this is the chance for him to prove he was worth that contract. Obviously, that did not happen. And they finally pulled the plug and benched him a couple weeks ago. But it's easy to say, like, that's the only problem. It's not. and that's been proven even now since he's been on the lineup. Obviously, the backup quarterbacks have been worse. The defense has been bad. There just really hasn't been very much positive to hang your hat on. So I'd say overall, the season's been like I said, a disappointment, but even worse than that. I mean, this is their 100th year anniversary, and they're
Mm.
creating towards the worst season in franchise history. So like, couldn't be a worse way to kind of put a bow on 100 years if your ownership, especially the Maras, who have owned the team since its inception. This is definitely a tough season for them to swallow.
Yeah, you mentioned the quarterback situation, and we saw Tommy DeVito get the start 2 games ago, and then it was Drew Lock. Where does that stand right now as far as the injury to DeVito, and who do you expect to start on Sunday?
Right. So, I mean, we're talking Wednesday morning, so I'm not sure that we might know the answer by the time
Yeah.
this drops. But going into Dable's press conference when he'll announce it on Wednesday afternoon, I expect it to be DeVito unless his forearm injury is more serious than we were let on. But the indications last week were it was really just a situation where it was like kind of almost like a bruise or it was just painful. It wasn't like he had some major injury that's going to require, 6 weeks getting shut down or surgery. And it was more just a fact the short turnaround with Thanksgiving, he couldn't, air it out and get ready. I mean, he tried to play, but couldn't. So again, now they've had the long weekend here, and it'll be 2 weeks. I would think he'll be ready again. I don't know. I haven't seen the MRIs. But the fact that Dable went to him first after Daniel Jones got benched, it's not like Drew Lock played so well on Thanksgiving. I don't think he would make him reconsider that plan. I think Drew Lock's the better quarterback, but we're kind of splitting hairs there with these two guys. So I would assume. Unless Tommy DeVito's health prevents, him from playing, I would assume he'll be the starter against the Saints on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, both had their difficulties as far as getting anything going offensively, but I think the turnovers maybe for Drew Lock and the pick six and the fumble that maybe are going to force the hand back to DeVito and give him another shot. It was a fun one when he played us last season in the Superdome. We had a lot of fun with just his aura and everything that he brings. But with the offense, the two rookies that you have in Malik Neighbors, somebody that we're obviously very familiar with down here, and then your running back in Tyrone Tracy, they seem like they have been bright spots this season.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, if I was gonna say there is any silver lines this season, the rookie class has been that. Obviously Neighbors was off to like a off the charts start the first 4 games. Then he did suffer a concussion, missed 2 games. I mean, he's still every week, the team sends out these notes and you don't even realize he's like still setting records. I think he has most catches in his first 10 career games. But it hasn't been quite as explosive and dynamic since he's been back from that concussion. And I think part of that is just really the circumstances around him. Again, the quarterback play has been abysmal. So it's hard to put up huge receiving numbers, but they still feed him the ball a ton. I mean, he'll be the number one target certainly on Sunday, and pretty much every Sunday he suits up for the Giants for the foreseeable future. And then Tracy has sort of been like a revelation, a 5th-round pick. Obviously, there's been so much talk about Saquon Barkley's departure. And I mean, listen, Tracy is not making anyone forget Saquon Barkley. But when you have a 5th-round rookie who's averaging 5 yards a carry, has had 3 100-yard games, I mean, that has been certainly a bright spot. One little thing with him is he's got 4 fumbles, and that's been a little bit of an issue. And actually, his playing time was cut back a little bit against Dallas. They went to the veteran Devin Singletary to start, but Tracy still got more carries, played more snaps. I would think that might have been a 1-game sort of like let's catch our breath here, and not even so much disciplinary, but just like slow things down for him. I would assume he'll get back to being the feature back. And then even defensively, they have a couple rookies. Tyler Nubin, the safety, who's played pretty much every snap. Drew Phillips, slot corner, who's played well. I mean, so like those are the things that they're going to look at as positives. Like, all right, we have these young guys. If they develop, hopefully they become the core of a winning team. Because as of right now, that core is kind of hollowed out, as you see by the results this year, and really going back, almost like a decade now. It's just been losing season after losing season with an aberration like 2022 mixed in.
Yeah, but right now you guys have the number 1 overall pick in the next draft. So
that's where
change.
Yeah, no, and that's what they have to be hanging their hopes on as well. It's a race to the bottom though, because I think they actually are 3rd right now according to Tankathon, because the Raiders and the Jaguars maybe strength of schedule. So I think they play each other though. So at least one of those teams is getting to 3 wins. And honestly, I don't see a win for the Giants. They've lost 7 in a row. This feels like it could end on a 12-game losing streak and being 2-15. And you would think that would be enough to get you the number 1 pick. And then honestly, if you're looking at it from the Giants' perspective, I would think the Saints is probably their last best chance to get a win, because it's another team that's struggling. It's a home game. Granted, they're 0-6 at home, so I don't know how much that adds. But If they're going to get a win, I don't think it's going to be Baltimore the following week. I don't think it's going to be Philly in the season finale unless they're resting guys. So I think if they're going to rally the troops, this feels like the game would have to be. But I promise you, a large segment of the fan base is saying just lose, baby, lose, because they want the #1 pick. They know they need, a quarterback. So whether that's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, whoever they think
Yeah.
can be the guy to turn this franchise around, that's what a lot of the fan base is focused on, not so much caring, how Sunday's outcome. As long as it's a loss, a lot of fans will be happy.
Yeah, definitely. Look, on the defensive side of things, we've dealt with a lot of injuries, and you just had, or the Giants just had, a big blow with the defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence going down, a dislocated elbow, which sounds just horrible. He is on IR, but he definitely was the most productive defensive player for this team. Uh, How does that impact things going forward?
I mean, you can't overstate the impacts of that. I mean, he's by far been their best player. I would also say they're most indispensable because the drop off from him to his backup is so significant. Like the rest of the defensive tackles on this team are barely NFL caliber guys. So you have a guy like Dexter Lawrence, who, at one point was in the defensive player of the year running. You take him off of the defense that already is allowing the most yards per carry in the league, has been a bad run defense. They were powered by their sacks for, like, say, the first half of the season. Last 4 games, they have 1 sack. So I mean, everything is hanging on by a thread with him in the middle, commanding double teams, triple teams, being a monster, and it still wasn't a very good defense. You take him out. Listen, I'm speaking of someone who has Alvin Kamara on my fantasy team. I'm looking forward to this matchup from that perspective because, man, again, their run defense is horrible with him on the field. You take him out, I think it's going to be kind of scary. I don't know how they're going to stop the run because, again, he's the best player in the defense. He's gone. And then there's nobody say, oh, well, at least they have this guy. There's no talent there at the defensive tackle position. So yeah, I think it's a monumental loss. And it's the one that, like, might just be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, they've mostly been competitive. They had a bad game against Tampa a couple weeks ago where they got blown out. But if you can't stop the run, and they got Kamara, they got Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry after that, they got Jonathan Taylor, like, they got some Saquon Barkley again. They got some big time rushing attacks on the schedule. It could get really ugly. And I'm saying that as a team that's 2-10 and lost 7 straight. I'm saying it could get uglier. So that's kind of a scary thought.
Well, not good for us with Taysom Hill suffering his injury last weekend, but good for your fantasy team because then, yes, AK will get all of the carries, I'm sure, in the run game. Looking into the secondary, there's only been 1 interception for the Giants this season. What's been the issue with being able to force takeaways and turnovers?
Yeah, I mean, and another NFL record you don't want to set. I think they have the longest stretch now without an interception because it's 11 games. They got 1 interception. It was in the opener, and it wasn't even by a defensive back. It was actually Dexter Lawrence. Kind of got a hand on Sam Darnold's arm as he threw, and the ball floated up in the air, and rookie linebacker Darius Musa picked it off. So that's it. 1 pick by a rookie linebacker who really doesn't even play. He was only in the lineup that game because of an injury. So it's been bad. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go into it. You would think, though, with the pass rush they have, again, at one point they were leading the league in sacks. They're falling back they're still in the top 10 with all that pressure on quarterbacks. You would just think that there'd be more arms getting hit. There'd be more overthrown. There'd be, and there just hasn't been. It's not even a situation where, like, you watch games around the league where guys drop interceptions or there's tip balls and they don't even come close. Like, it's hard to really fathom. I can't believe it. I've never seen anything like it. I think a big problem is just the lack of talent. Like, the cornerbacks aren't very good. And they aren't guys who had great ball skills in college either. Like guys like Deonte Banks was a 1st-round pick, had like 2 picks in college. All the other cornerbacks just weren't guys who were prolific, like, with ball production. So obviously that hasn't improved in the NFL. And then the safeties, same deal, where it's like they don't make plays on the ball. And that's a little surprising in one respect because Tyler Nubin, who's a rookie 2nd-round pick, he was a big interception guy in Minnesota. That was sort of his reputation as a ball hawk. That hasn't translated yet. But, he's a rookie. But yeah, so it's a young secondary, not a super talented secondary, but it's remarkable. Again, there isn't just a pass where the quarterback airmails and it lands in a safety's lap. They have not even been around the ball. So that's been a big problem because, again, they're not a great defense, but if you at least have takeaways, give yourself a chance, and they just haven't done that at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the MO of the Saints defense. They are bottom in the league in yards allowed, but top 5 in interceptions. So they're really shutting people down when it matters. And the red zone also very high up there as far as not allowing touchdowns. They've only allowed the fourth fewest in the league so far. So it's been tough because they let all these explosive plays go and they allow a ton of yardage, but then, in the red zone, they seem to be able to lock it down. What do you think that this game is going to come down to on Sunday?
Ooh, I mean, obviously we touched on the run defense. Like if I was the Saints, this is not a game to get creative and let's see how many times Derek Carr can attack this weak secondary. I mean, you can do that too if you want. Again, maybe speaking selfishly for my fantasy team, I would give Alvin Kamara 25 carries. Like I think if that's not your game plan, you're crazy because again, it's a bad run defense with Dexter Lawrence. First game without him, I just don't see how they're gonna be able to stop him consistently. Because I do, it's probably gonna be cold and windy. I think you open up more elements. Again, they don't intercept the ball, but you still open up more elements to disaster if you're dropping back to pass a ton. I mean, again, I think they'll be able to do that when they need to, because again, the pass defense isn't great, but the run defense to me is such a weakness that I would think that the Saints exploit that. And then on the other side of the ball, I mean, let's assume it's DeVito. I think the reason why they would go with him, he's less volatile than Drew Lock. Like, again, I think Drew Lock's a better quarterback. I think they have more chances to score points with Drew Lock. But I think the thing that they liked about DeVito last year was he was like the ultimate game manager. Like, he only had 3 interceptions and he played, he had 6 starts. Like, he's going to take care of the ball. So if they can have a low scoring game, Tyrod Tracy has a good game on the ground. You have a couple explosive plays from Malik Neighbors. Like, I think the Giants are going to win games. It's going to be 17-13. They're not trying to outscore anybody at this point. They're going to have to hope to sort of like shorten the game, hope the run defense isn't just, completely dominated on the other side. But yeah, so like for them, they need a low scoring game because I just don't think with Tommy DeVito at quarterback, they're going to be able to keep up with, any high powered offenses. And for the Saints, again, I just think it'd be crazy if the game plan's anything other than a lot of Alvin Kamara and make this run defense stop them.
What is the atmosphere going to be like? How has the fan support been there at the stadium, and then also the weather, because we haven't played a cold weather game yet.
Yeah, so I mean, it's the temperature has turned. It's one of those weird things where like 2 weeks ago it was like 60 degrees, and now I'm looking at it right now. It's saying it's gonna be 49 on Sunday because it's colder than that right now. I can promise you that. But at the Meadowlands, it's always windy. It'll probably feel colder. I'm sure that there'll be some elements, but that doesn't seem. It could be a lot worse for mid-December. So Saints maybe catch a break there. But as far as the atmosphere, again, I've covered a lot of these seasons, and by December, it's a lot of times it's the visiting team's fans overrun it. So I don't know how well the Saints fan base travels or if there's a lot in this area, because otherwise, I think it could just be sort of a ghost town, because usually it's like you have Eagles fans and Cowboys fans or Packers fans, whoever, teams with big fan bases will just take it over. And that's tough to swallow for the ownership, but it's probably almost worse if you look out and there's just swaths of empty seats, because I think that's where the Giants fan base is now. It's not even like the disappointment and even the anger of the season. That's kind of dissipated. Now it's just apathy. People are just kind of over it. Like I said, a lot of them are just looking forward to a draft pick. So they're not even going to want the team to win. So yeah, I would think unless the Saints fan base, travels really well, I think it will not be a situation where that stadium's gonna be rocking and everywhere with silent counts. I think it'll be kind of dead. And then that's kind of what the Giants are looking forward here in the next couple of weeks. I mean, it's just gonna be just get to the finish line, I think, is kind of the attitude of the fan base. Obviously, you'd hope the team doesn't look at it that way, but it's almost hard for them not to be somewhat checked out at this point.
How surprised were you by the Daniel Jones change?
I wasn't surprised. I think they kind of handled it poorly, but I mean, he didn't play very well. I mean, there's no way to slice that any two ways. I mean, at the time he got benched, they were 2-8, last in the league in scoring. Again, as I said, there are other factors, but I mean, you're the quarterback, you're the guy that if you're going to make a change, it has to be there. That game they lost in Germany to Carolina was particularly bad. Like, he played super bad in that game. And then there was always this $23 million injury guarantee hanging over everything with him. So it was like, if he was just playing this bad and that didn't exist, maybe they could have, rode with him a little longer. But it's like, you get to a point where 2-8, this season's lost. Are we really going to risk potentially, adding $23 million cash and, to the cap next year? So a totally understandable decision at the time they made it. But then it was just kind of clumsy, where he was there at practice for a couple of days and he wasn't doing anything. And then he gives us a kind of farewell press conference. And then the next day he goes to the owner, John Mara, and asks, and obviously is granted his release. But yes, I wasn't surprised. I mean, I think it was the right move from a football decision, from a business decision. But just kind of like everything else this year, it's still like it didn't go as well as it could have. And that's just sort of the hallmark of, when you're 2-10, not much goes right.
Well, I hope you guys figure it out, but maybe just not this weekend.
Yeah, listen, a lot of Giants fans would be on, all Saints fans on Sunday again, because I think most people are worried about the draft stock. So yeah, I don't think you find too many people pushing back on that theory that yeah, don't get it right this week. Let the Saints get a win, and Darren Rizzi, the local boy, get him a little momentum as the interim coach. But yeah, no, I think Giants fans are with you. Go Saints on Sunday for the most part.
Well, thank you so much for all the insight, and hopefully we're in for a good one on Sunday.
All right, thank you.
The game Sunday is at MetLife Stadium, a 12 o'clock Central kick. Kevin Kugler, Daryl Johnson, and Laura Oakman will be on the call for Fox. For the best listening experience this NFL season, you can feel every play, every hit, every moment with the Sony 1000 XM5 noise-canceling headphones, the official headphones of the New Orleans Saints. With premium noise cancellation, you're in the zone, no distractions, just pure football. Whether you're in your living room or on the go, you'll never miss a beat with Sony headphones. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. And as always, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Friday, we'll feature a sit-down with Saints defensive tackle Bryan Bresee. Talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.